Well, let's continue our coverage of the conflict currently unfolding between Israel and Palestine. It follows what has been described as a surprise attack by Hamas yesterday morning. The Israeli government has vowed to destroy the group's capabilities. We're joined now by Fleur Hassan Nahoum, who is the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. Good evening, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Israel has declared a state of war as we speak. What does that action trigger, particularly in your response to this conflict?
Well, first of all, we've had an unprecedented attack yesterday. We woke up, it was a Jewish holiday and the Sabbath, and we woke up at 7:30 in the morning to sirens across the country. I took my 4 children and we went into our shelter and we stayed there for the majority of the morning. Afterwards, we found out that hundreds of terrorists had broken through the border, killing innocent people and taking hostages, innocent elderly people, young people, children. And so this is an act of war, an attack on the sovereignty of our country. And as the Prime Minister says, we will protect our country and restore calm.
Let's talk about what this has meant then, particularly for those who may have been in your country on business, for tourist purposes. How has movement in and out of the country been affected as a result of this declaration?
Well, it's not the announcement, it's the actual act of war that was perpetrated against us. And you have to understand that we left Gaza in 2005. There's no Israeli presence in Gaza, and so this is why it's a very clear act of war, because it's one country attacking another country through its defined border. And I feel very bad. There's so many tourists here in Jerusalem, in the city and in the country, that came here to have a lovely time, Jewish and Christian and Muslims from all over around the world. And many of their flights have been cancelled. Many of them are very confused. They don't know what a shelter is, how to run into a shelter. And so we're in a very difficult position, and they're in a difficult position. This is really not what we expected the end of the Jewish holiday period would look like.
So as things stand, particularly for the benefit of those that may have loved ones in the country currently, Ms. Hassan Nahoum, what is it that is happening to those individuals that are effectively trapped as things are?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last sentence.
So what I'm asking you is, what then becomes the status of those individuals, whether it's tourists, people that were in the country or on business? When do you think that they might have an opportunity to actually leave? Give us an update on the state of movement.
It's just a question of when they can find a flight. They don't have to stay here. The status, they remain as tourists. And it's a question of finding the flights, because a lot of, airline companies have cancelled flights to Israel. The national carrier, El Al, is still working as normal.
All right. Let's talk about the breach of the country's borders. One of the spokespeople of the army said that you're looking at a situation where the border has been breached in at least 7 places. What has been the work done right now to at least try and lessen those breaches?
Well, I heard a different number. I heard that essentially in 29 different spots the terrorists came in through. Maybe the breaches were less, as the spokesperson said. And really the question is, why were we not stronger protecting the border? That is a question that every Israeli citizen is asking himself.
Let's talk about the kind of support that you've been getting from your allies. What has that been like?
Well, first of all, I think we got an incredibly unequivocal statement yesterday from President Joe Biden saying that he stands with Israel, that this is an act of war, that this is inhumane, and these are terrorists. Essentially, this is the extension. He didn't say this, but we know that the Hamas are the extension of Iran. They're essentially ISIS here on our border. They are the same dark regime that oppresses women and LGBTQ people. They are the long arm of a very dark regime that represses its people, and we have that on our border. And President Biden, I think, was very unequivocal in his support for Israel, as most European countries and South American countries and around the world. Only the genocidal regimes have decided to side with Hamas, which is, of course, no surprise.
There are Palestinians in Gaza who've told several news publications that they've received messages on their phones from Israeli authorities, especially those that live along the border, to evacuate their premises. Are you aware of messages that have been sent out by the Israeli government, whether it is to other Israelis or even to Palestinians?
Well, Israel has got a very strong moral code in war, and we send notes to people because we are the opposite of Hamas. We do not want civilian casualties. We do not want to kill innocents. They go and look for innocents, and we protect innocents. And so Gaza residents are getting messages to leave the areas that are going to be attacked by Israel in order to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure.
Are you aware of any other territories where violence may flare up, where messages, again, alerts have been issued?
Yes, people in a tall building yesterday, which was hiding weaponry, residents were told to leave the building because the building was going to be bombed.
And where was that building?
In Gaza.
All right. We're also seeing reports, and this is coming out of Egypt, that Israeli citizens in Egypt have been given notices to leave the country. Are you aware of that at all?
Well, there was a soldier this morning in Alexandria who shot 2 Israeli tourists, and so Israelis have been advised not to stay there because of the current atmosphere.
Are there any other countries where such alerts have been issued to Israelis?
Well, we had an incident on the border with the north this morning as well. Again, this is Hezbollah, which is the long arm of Iran. Hezbollah and Hamas are the proxies of Iran, and so they're in coordination, unfortunately, in this war.
The U.S., which you've just said is a strong ally of Israel, has come out to say that it has concerns about this conflict spreading, particularly if it isn't contained. Speak to me about whether or not you share those concerns, and if we are to look at the conflict not being contained, what are some of the fears around that?
Well, absolutely. Our fear is that the conflict will spread and Hezbollah will attack us on the north, and the West Bank Palestinian terrorists from Hamas will try and do something in Judea and Samaria. Yes, these are very real fears, but I would advise these other people not to get involved in this conflict. Listen, in the end, Israel will win. There's absolutely no doubt. We have one of the best armies in the world, the best technology in the world. The question is not whether we will win. The question is how many innocents will die until we win. And so we really hope that these people sober up and understand that they're not getting rid of Israel, they're not destroying the state of Israel, that we're here to stay. The moment they accept that is the moment that we can start talking about peace.
What do you believe has triggered this current cycle of violence?
For me, it's very clear. Israel is in negotiations with the Americans and the Saudis to make peace and normalization with Saudi Arabia. Iran does not want that to happen, so its long arm in Hezbollah and in Hamas are here to try and stop normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That, to me, is the reason that we're in this conflict right now.
Let's speak about the situation in Jerusalem then tonight. In South Africa, it's evening, so most people are sort of getting ready for bed now. But what's the situation in Jerusalem, and what are you anticipating over the next 24 hours? I think especially when it comes to just the general safety and security of residents there.
So this morning we met with the mayor. We've opened all the shelters in the city, the public shelters, some private shelters. We've set up a hotline for people who are panicked and anxious, or people who have families who have disappeared or in the army. We're also speaking to the leadership in the Arab part of the city to make sure that everything stays calm. And so we are bolstering our police presence in the difficult neighborhoods to give people a sense of confidence.
Fleur Hassan Nahoum is the Deputy Jerusalem Mayor. I'll leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for your time on News at Prime.